नहीं मैम, रहने देते हैं फिर आगे।
रहने देते हैं, ठीक है ना।
Namaste and greetings. I, Avi Sharma, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Learning. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to Day 7 of the Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, Cohort 4.0 Winter 2024, an online national winter school program, a 3-month immersive online law and public policy awareness certificate training course, and internship program. The chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor IMPRI. The lead advisor and legal hands-on session expert is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, visiting senior fellow IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher, gender and human rights. The conveners for this course are Dr. Ajay Gudavarthi ji, Advocate Celine Thomas ji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. The expert panel for today includes Professor Anuradha M. Chenoy ji, former Dean at School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, visiting senior fellow, IMPRI, advocate, author, and researcher, gender and human rights. We will also share the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind attention. Before we start today's session, I would like to state the housekeeping announcement. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making general comments in the questions to save time. To begin today's session, I would invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished Professor IMPRI, to give her opening remarks. We welcome you, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you, Avi, for introducing the course and rules and regulations. I would first of all begin with thanking the conveners of the course, IPPYF, Dr. Ajay Gudavarthi, Advocate Celine Thomas, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Arjun Kumar, and moderator Avi Sharma. I welcome Professor Anuradha Chenoy and Advocate Shalu Nigam. So far, we have discussed the question about the origin of Human Rights Day, and also we discussed various instruments for peacemaking, peace building, peacekeeping, and we began with the Oslo Agreement 1993, Belfast Agreement 1998, and Columbia Peace Agreement 2016, and we had a keynote address by Mr. Sandeep Chachra, where he talked about important material reality that can result in sustainable and long-lasting peace. First of it is a decolonizing the political economy, decolonization of currency, no to sanctioned countries, and also decolonization of global system. And he also introduced the participants with various theoreticians like Franz Fanon, Samir Amin, various the dependency theory. And he also said that what we need is not a sponge slogans in the name of decolonization. We need a very bottom-up approach and the people's initiative to decolonize. After that, we had Ms. Rita Manchanda, who spoke on redefining agency and resilience, and she talked about the whole approach of, say, expansion of understanding of military security to human security, and the feminist scholarship, which visibilized local women's agency, advocacy, and networking at transnational, national, regional, and local contexts, and role of civil society organizations in 1325 resolution and WPS agenda. She shared several of her experiences of direct interaction with the refugees and women peace builders in South Asia. And then we had day 2, Dr. Professor Swaran Singh. He talked about the new frontiers of global peace, and he introduced the inclusive peace policy making for cyber conflict resolution. He also deconstructed the term peace in a different political and geopolitical context and urban oriental and occidental understanding of peace. and he talked about Johann Galtung, and also the need for a hybridization of peace praxis, where he gave example of Martin Luther King and how he implemented Mahatma Gandhi's message in a civil rights movement through nonviolent direct action. We had Dr. Gladstone Xaviers, who focused on the condition of and ill treatment of migrant population, and he gave several examples. And he said that the question of migration and citizenship is directly linked to peace issues of peace, and he demanded that there should be stakeholder engagement, nothing without us, nothing about us without us, data-driven policies on conflict resolution, inclusive framework and inclusive language. He emphasized that, and he talked about equitable allocation of resources and their accessibilities, and monitoring and evaluation of peace initiatives. On day 3, we had Advocate Flavia Agnes, who talked on reforming legal system through feminist lens, and she shared the experiences of women's movement right from 1980 anti-Mathura rape case campaign, a nationwide anti-rape campaign, and the work of Majlis in terms of handholding and providing institutional support to women survivors of violence. And he said that though their effort is local and small, but they see it as a test case, that how whatever feminist ethos and philosophies and vision we have, we can't implement, we can't realize it without direct action. And that is why it is very important to intervene in cases of gender-based violence. We had a first legal hands-on by Dr. Shalu Nigam on violence against women, the backlash and resistance, international, because that was a day of international, beginning of the International Day of Violence Against Women, 25th of November. And she also gave that example of Ms. Giselle Palicot, that shame should change the site, that instead of victim blaming, we have to now push the blame, and we have to transfer the blame on the tormentors, and take action. On day 4, we had Professor Naila Ali Khan, who gave an insider view of condition in Kashmir, especially reimagining peace in Kashmir. She was very erudite, and she had a lyrical beauty in her speech, and she gave so many examples of grassroots level initiative happening at Kashmir. And she also criticized the diaspora community, giving a very wrong image of Kashmir situation. And she said that we need to project icons like Lalde, who is a fitting figure for synthetic and syncretic tradition. And Lalde had questioned self-abdication of women, subverted reliance on man, brought in watershed in cultural and spiritual world of Kashmir. After that, we had a second legal hands-on by Dr. Shalu Nigam, where she began with a tribute to 15 women who had played pivotal role in constitution making along with Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and her book is also out, and she said that we need to bridge the gap between what is promised in the constitution and the reality. The gap has to be reduced through direct intervention. On day 5, we had Dr. Stuti Roy, who spoke on world peace and on 3 aspects of peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. She started with the reflection on Professor Johan Galtung's Norwegian sociologist, who was a peace scholar and who also started a peace institution, and how so many peace negotiations were influenced by his perspective, where he talks about phase 1, before violent culture, and phase 2, which is during violence, what happens to women also, and phase 3, which is the post-violence culture of revenge. And she said that she also brought in the inputs by post-colonial scholars, Laila Abu Lugod, Do Muslim Women Need Saving, that the whole mission which the white feminists have of saving Muslim women from the evil hands of Muslim man. So she questioned, she quoted, extensively quoted the writings of Leela, And then she also mentioned Azad Issa and so many other post-colonial this thing. She also talked about Orientalism and Edward Said's this thing, Gayatri Spivak, who with regards to talking about women only for their imperialist purpose, where she gave example of British colonialists talking about sati. Then we had Dr. Shalu Nigam's third legal hands-on on women's rights and conjugal relationships. So from the macro perspective, we came to the individual women's survival struggle and especially the question of child marriage and non-consensual forced marriage. She gave three important examples. One of Fulmani Devi, who died at the age of 10 in 1889 after marital rape by her husband. On the very first night of marriage. She also talked about Rukmabai's struggle for her independence, because at the age of 11, her husband wanted to cohabit with her in 1884. And the national label debate and the polarization we had on age of consent debate. And then she talked about the current cases in Supreme Courts and various other courts. And she talked about the question of consent, which is now also being debated in the context of protection of children on Sexual Offense Act, and the recent Supreme Court judgment where they said that child marriage in particular case, the decision is still in abeyance because this government of India has questioned Supreme Court decision regarding application of POCSO in a case of child marriage. On day 6, we had that coincided with the International Human Rights Day, 10th December. We had Dr. Vaida Nayanar, who focused on future of equality and dignity and effectiveness of international law in the context of current. She focused one in-depth case study she provided of an Israel genocide attack on Palestine, and she gave the role played by various UN agencies and how they were able, and she was not so cynical. Participants were asking questions, but she said that all these 15 agencies coming together, and also the role of International Commission for Jurists and International Criminal Court is giving us a hope that we will be able to bring long-term peace in the Middle East. And Dr. Shalu Nigam's legal hands-on was a fourth session that was on localization of sustainable development goal. She not only explained 17 goals, but she also connected each goal with the local women's struggles. When she talked about environment, she mentioned Chipko. She also mentioned Niyamgiri struggle and this role of the Supreme Court Bhopal gas tragedy, which is considered to be ecocide. And she said that it is the people's struggles and the grassroots level bottom-up approach that only will be able to make sustainable development goals realizable. And she said that also that war means violence, poverty, and forced displacement, broken lives, insecurity, and lack of future. And that is why we need to if all the efforts and the resources which are going for war, we need to divert them for the developmental concerns. And today, now we have Professor Anuradha Chenoy and legal hands-on fifth session by Dr. Shalu Nigam. Over to IMPRI.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Without any further delay, I would now like to invite Professor Anuradha M. Chenoy, former Dean at School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, for her session on women, peace and security. We welcome you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Patel and friends at IMPRI and the young students and colleagues who have joined this session. I'm going to be speaking on women, war, security, and peace. And I'm going to also, from what I heard from Professor Patel just now, I think you've done so much already. So I think it might just be reinventing the wheel from my side because you seem to have done a lot. But anyway, to begin at the very beginning, I think all of you by now know these basic building blocks because I what I can see a lot in my engagement, that even now people are mixing up these concepts of women, gender, and feminism, for example. And, even when they're talking about a feminist foreign policy, actually, they're talking about the need for women in foreign policy as opposed to a feminist foreign policy. So we'll get to that. So really, women and gender, you need to know the first difference is that sex and, sex and gender are different. Sex is biology. Gender is ideological, the material, the power, the sociological relations between men and women and what you grow up with. And the term masculine and feminine, they do not, I mean, there is a natural characteristic, but they are gendered terms. So you're born with sex and you grow up with gender and you acquire masculine and feminine traits. And those remain with you and they remain in society at different levels. Moreover, I think we must note that gender is not just binary. It's much more diverse, and it has to include the queer, the transgender, the non-gender identities that are culturally specific, and that these are also fluid. So also, you know what patriarchy is by now, I'm sure, because it's used so often, including in our political discourse, where patriarchy is the ideology that builds social structure through which men, or at least, I believe it's not just men, even women can dominate. It is the ideology. There are men who will not dominate, who have learned to be critics of patriarchy, and there are women use that system to dominate other men and women. So really, patriarchy is that ideology. And feminism, as you know, is the theory and advocacy of women's rights. It asks for women's equality in work and in public and private spaces. Feminism, it actually centered on the notion of equality and rights, but it's also about political, social, and economic rights. Moreover, and I'm going to focus on this aspect today, is that it's an ongoing project and there are many feminisms, and increasingly there are very polarized debates between feminisms. And on war and peace and security and foreign policy, I'm going to look at some of these debates. Of course, there have been traditional roles, defined with women and gender, with feminists, with femininity and masculinity. These have changed for some, but please remember they do remain very same for some in some countries. And moreover, even if their roles have changed, even if you have increasingly see women at the workplace, when the minute they go home, the roles reverse. The triple burden where you were in the workplace and the home place also, where you continue to have the role of nurturing and caring, the unpaid roles of women. A lot of in very so-called liberated societies of the West, you continue to have this battle of roles. And you can see how masculine power as protectors and security providers, the meaning it gives to manliness and masculinity. And now there is also a backlash against women's power and women's search for equality. You can see that in the recent US elections, this conservative backlash. And that is why I use this poster, where there was a lot of support for the old role masculinity. One could find, this was a poster being used that you need that to get back, and women must accept this kind of role. So there is this national anxiety expressed as a crisis of masculinity. And actually, war and cultural definitions increase this old notion of masculinity. So it keeps coming back. Now, as far as motherland and war, now we just get on straight to the whole discourse of war and security, because and why this whole concept of motherland is used, because it evokes such a deep emotion, and there's a need for protection of the motherland and call for war. Because I've seen this. I recently had gone to Moscow for a Russia, India, China academic conference, and the posters I saw calling for, calling young people to join the war effort, they were you could see the same kind of posters in World War I and II, where come and protect your motherland, come and be heroes, martyrs. And this is across genders. Mothers and wives and sisters also feel that I've done the best to protect the honor, because women's honor is then tied to motherland. And then when the enemy seeks to violate the honor of the enemy, they feel by violating women, they are able to dishonor a nation. So honor is played out in wars and armed conflicts on the bodies of women. And also it leads to a kind of thing that, mothers would rather have sons because daughters are so useless at the time of war. And you can see this, these are not outdated concepts. You can see in the recent genocides, in the October 7, also attack, the whole argument was that women were raped. Later it was found out actually they were not raped, but they needed, that to mobilize the population to have revenge on a particular community. And the recent reports of the UN, and they show that 70% of people hurt and maimed and killed in this war in Gaza, for example, have been women and children. So then, we have so many armed conflicts. These days, you don't hear of so many armed conflicts in India, but we've just had these armed conflicts all over South Asia, since this is a lecture about South Asia. And currently, there are 56 armed conflicts. That is internal conflict, not state to state. In Myanmar, for example, ethnic communities against the military government, or there was the LTTE, there was the Maoists in Nepal. So there are these armed conflicts. And with all this, with the kind of geopolitics that you have, the wars in Russia and Ukraine, and the threat to war in the Indo-Pacific, there is then a militarization of society. This militarization, when I talk about militarization, I'm not talking against the military. The military has a role in a state. What I'm talking about is the use of military values in everyday life. That is the use of force as opposed to engagement and talking. The enforcement of hierarchy, which is a marker, whether it's in your occupation, in oppression, and that kind of very overt militarist nationalism, which is not really necessary. And you can see these armed conflicts in all of South Asia. This is from the LTTE, and in the Northeast, in Kashmir, in Chittagong Hills, in Bangladesh, in the Northwest frontier, in Baluch, in Pakistan, you name it, across South Asia, you'll have witnessed these conflicts. And what happened to women, and were they able to get any justice, is still a question which has not been resolved. And that is the reason why we had Security Council 1325. You've already had a lecture on that, so I will not go on to it, except to say that it is not the final, and it was not the final. It was part of a process of women's movement. It rested on the shoulders of the International Women's Movement, the CEDAW, the Beijing Conference, and it said that women must be present in all political processes, on the peace tables, because what happens is the men who make war, they are the ones who, etc., made by men. Whereas women, they were in the war. There is no war without women. And yet, when peace negotiations are done, you'd hardly see any women in those negotiations. So really, you talk, there is this general cultural talk that there are no wars without women. Our women, goddesses are all armed. And you can see Durga and Kali and Ambika and Padmavati and 100 others. But what does it mean for other women? Because it is a certain kind of woman who is pedestalized. She has to be an armed virgin, for example. That's how they showed it in Sri Lanka. While women break into new areas in the workplace, even when we think we're empowered, because now we're no longer confined to our homes and we can go out and work and we're encouraged to work, yet these ideological notions of masculinity, of militarism, of male service and different from female service, and this whole notion of that really prevents women from really getting proper empowerment or equality. So war really reinforces gender asymmetry. You have slogans, and I'm just giving one or two examples of how during the 2001 kind of conflict between India and Pakistan, and when India went in for the nuclear, the option, etc. In Pakistan, President Musharraf said, "We are not wearing bangles and we can fight India on our own." So bangles, that means we are not women, we are men, we are masculine. And the reply from PM Vajpayee was, in Punjab, where bangles are wear, we also wear kada, that's steel. So this kind of discourse, the metaphoric uses of gender representation, that the nation really expresses its political goals in sexual terms. And very often this goes on, though, of course, now women, they immediately kind of pounce on leaders when they do that. So it is better. But nonetheless, we have to still analyze, what does this sexual representation of war have for social and personal experiences. And again, that if you, for example, after the 1998 test, they said, we are not eunuchs, we have power. So masculine power as opposed to the emasculinized woman or asexualized person, and is constantly there in our nation, all are, not just ours, I'm saying all nations' discourses. And there is then this militarization of society, culture, and so now I just want to get on to the fact that there are different approaches to this, how we change gender. Now, the United Nations uses quite a balanced approach, and they talk about the gender negative approach, the gender neutral, gender sensitive, gender positive, and gender transformative, which is what the UN at least looks for. Now, the UN has to have a very broad scape, because, it's looking at some states which are just not, they're still very gender negative. They'll still have force women, at the most you can drive a car, but you can't be really seen in public. Recently in Syria, when this terror group, which is now being whitewashed by the West, they'd announced in Christian areas that women can't come out alone. So suddenly, from a kind of a secular system, authoritarian, I'm not going to make a political analysis. What I'm saying is, again, at this time of war and social and political change, this gender negativity has again come in. And it resurges, there's a resurgence of this repeatedly. So we do hope for gender transformative approaches. And it is with that the Security Council 1325, etc., came up. But at the same time, women's bodies are still being contested. And you can see that because now NATO, for example, which is a highly militarized organization, which we study in international relations, they are very, in a very assertive way, co-opting women into their system of militarism and ideology. So, for example, in the military-industrial complex of the United States, they have a lot of women executives. In 4 out of the biggest, or 5, the biggest defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, they'll show that we have women executives. So women are equal because they can make as many machines to kill as many people as men can. So that has become the pinnacle of women's liberation. Not the feminist idea of peace, but the masculinist liberation that women are equal to men because they are, they can be as, cosmopolitan defenders of and in militaries. And this whole debate, should women be in militaries, which we will touch on in a second. Really, therefore, but this is then the debate between the liberal feminists and the other feminists. For them, the liberal feminists, they're mostly the Western feminists. They believe in individual empowerment. That is, women should get autonomy to choose whether they want to be in the military or not. And you have the autonomy not to be. So it's a very individual choice. Whereas other writers, like there is an excellent book by this lady, feminist scholar called Greenberg, referred to it here, Jennifer Greenberg, At War with Women, Military and Humanitarianism, in which she shows this to be the new imperial feminism, through which women understand themselves to be global ambassadors and of liberating other brown or black women. So they'll say that, it's good to have a war in Afghanistan so women can be liberated. Don't sanction the Afghan regime because women are not being given rights. They don't understand that in these societies, men and women are interlinked, that they have to seek their own liberation. And if you just do it from the top through imperialism, you're going to reverse it. And that is what happened in Afghanistan. Despite saying that we are entering this war to liberate women, after 20 years of war, where more women were killed than before, you have the Taliban replacing the Taliban after $20 billion. So really, this is the debate. And what the feminists are saying is this politics of rupture, meaning that we don't think women should be included in this current neoliberal economic system as it is, or being included in war, or states which are waging war against other states calling themselves a feminist foreign policy, because this feminism is not of inclusion, do not want to be labeled with. Our feminism is the feminism which makes sure that there is no violence against women, because militarism leads to violence of against women in the home and in the workplace. That violences interconnect. That if you want domestic violence and less access for women to complain. And therefore, feminists also argue for the need for international laws of war. Now, I'm saying that these laws of war do exist in the Geneva Convention, in the International Humanitarian Conventions, in the Geneva Protocols. Now, what happened is, in the Geneva Conventions have been signed by a lot of countries in the global south, including India. But later in 1977, they put these additional protocols too, for civilian protections. and in which women are especially protected even during an internal armed conflict or any armed conflict. So many countries have not adopted these. Protocol 2, as amended in 1977 to protect victims of armed conflict. And I believe there should be a debate on that. And those who are studying international law, war, peace, security, they should start talking about this, that governments need to now need to revise their Geneva Conventions, which they are party to, and make sure that this protocol 2s are also signed, and it would be a good situation for all, because really, I mean, what we are being absolutely blitzkrieg by is now these how, of course, how wars produce refugees, but how how women are placed as the other, and they stand out. So really, we have a long way to go. We need to speak a lot on intersectionality. And you can see, I just saw this yesterday, this poster on the importance of women leaders. And you can see this was in IIT last week. And it said Conference on Women Leaders, and I couldn't see a single woman on the stage, quite frankly. So we have traveled very far, but we do have much further to go. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your enlightening address on women, peace, and security. We deeply value your insights and thought-provoking perspectives. Now, I would like to invite our chair, Vibhuti ma'am, to share her remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
You gave us a very robust analytical framework and also deconstructed so many terminologies which are casually used. I would like to know that how do you reflect on the roles of instruments such as Truth Commission, or currently things which are discussed about the International Commission for Jurists and International Criminal Court? To what extent? Because people have lost their faith on the UN, the way your decisions your UNHRC is taking or UNSC is taking. But at least these three instruments, at least African countries or some of the Asian countries, they think that they can deliver. Do you think they can deliver?
Well, I think, there has been a lot of frustration with the UN that, they've not been able to intervene in Gaza. There's a genocide going on. Live, you can see it on your phones the minute you switch it on, and yet nobody is doing anything. Now, I must say that there's no alternative to the UN, even despite that. And also, the UN reflects the international system. It was made in 1945, and it is our position that it needs to reform, especially the Security Council. But if you have a Security Council with the 5 victors of the World War II who have veto power to veto each other, what do you expect? Because the UN General Assembly cannot really, whatever resolution it passes is not enforceable. What can be enforced is from a UN Security Council resolution to intervene, or to, if there's its body of the International Court of Justice is a very important body. And it was used recently very well by the South Africans, who brought to it to show, and they came to the verdict that there is a plausible genocide, this is a quote unquote, plausible genocide in Gaza, and they're examining all the evidences. Now, the role it plays is of legitimizing and delegitimizing states, because the most important countries who are backing this genocide are vetoing. They vetoed like over 100 resolutions and attempts to do it. But if you don't have the UN, you have even nothing else. So our focus has to be continuously to try and reform the UN. And I think new bodies like the BRICS and the fact that they're searching for multipolarity is also helping. The ICC and the Rome Statute, some countries signed it. We did not. The Americans did not. Israel did not. So they feel that we will not be culpable. But it's still an important body. And recently it's been delegitimized so much because the Americans have said that's only meant for third world dictators, not for a great person like Netanyahu. So there are these problems in international. You have to keep negotiating and pushing because we believe in non-violent struggles. We believe in, ultimately that truth will prevail and the mixture of feminism and Gandhi and all this. And so I think we have to depend on these institutions, even if they're not delivering to our satisfaction. We have to go on with them, just like we're going on with equality for women and women's rights and feminism. Thank you.
The UN is a victim of its own making, no? So
Yes.
because but you don't think that this will change?
No, it can gradually. I mean, there is
By the
imperialism after all.
multipolar world, if we just
Multipolarity is irreversible and it is getting stronger by the day. And yeah, so I've just written a paper on it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
It's an EPW actually.
Yes, okay. EPW we have access to.
Yeah.
We'll go by author index and get.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to open the floor for questions. Participants can either use the Q&A box or the raise their hand feature, and they can ask the questions.
Are they given permission to speak? Unmute.
There's nothing in the.
Yeah, Dr. Shalu Nigam is.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful, explanation about whole concept of war, gender, and peace. But if we know that how women's bodies are being treated during war, and how women are facing a lot of problems even due to the policies such as neoliberalism and other kind of top kind of approaches. But as an activist who is working on a ground, what kind of things you will suggest that I should, do to really, to see that, how to explain it to students and how to make a sense of it at the ground level reality. Thank you.
I think, you need really actually just use the instruments of deconstructing women's roles as you do in public spaces to show that in war, actually, many of these roles get even further stereotyped. Women get so stereotyped. War is such a terrible activity, and yet there's an attempt to glorify it and to say it's essential. So that the way activists should do it is really keep looking at these roles and show how war is a gendered enterprise, how it is masculinist. And when women join militias, they sometimes join militias for their own freedom or to get away from oppression. But within these structures, they're again oppressed. So really the task is to show these imperial projects, to show these as projects of power, to look at the wars which we've seen close to us, to relate the experience, to, of course, take up the cases. And as Professor Patel just said, things like truth and reconciliation commissions. Ultimately, Sri Lanka didn't have it, even though and the war crimes went unattended. So retribution in the minds of women and others remain. So I think that's the way to do it, and also look at the decolonized lenses. There are lots of resources from the UN, from women's groups of how to look at women, war, and peace.
Thank you, ma'am, for this explanation. But even if we look around and even in our own home, we see how the violent forces of BJP, they have during the demolition of Babri Masjid, even women joined in, and even
Yes.
otherwise also women are joining in some kind of projects which are anti-women. So in that kind of
Exactly. So you have to show patriarchy as an ideology, which even women adhere to. And that is why I did that first lecture of looking at these terms, because we feel all women are peaceful. And whereas that's not the case, women have been said that women are more peaceful to keep them out of power relations and power. But, and they also say that if you want to be in power, you have to be like a man. You have to negotiate like a man. That's not true. Men can negotiate like women to be in power. So we have to show that this ideology of war, the ideology of harming the other, these are all interlinked, and we need to question all of them through debate and discussion. And it's the ideology. We're not fighting men. We are fighting the ideology of masculinity, of patriarchy, of oppression. And we are fighting for not just equal rights. We are fighting against these ideologies. We are fighting for equal rights so that we can say no to that ideology of patriarchy.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. It's always a pleasure learning from you. We look forward to having you at our future IMPRI events as well. Moving on with our next session for today, I would now like to invite Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigamji, visiting Senior Fellow IMPRI, Advocate, Author and Researcher, Gender and Human Rights, for her session on legal hands-on and interactive session. We welcome you, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so taking this idea forward, that how patriarchy and misogyny should be countered. So I'll start, with today's thing. And last week we have seen, that there was some video of a man who's being, who has given, that 80 minutes of video in which he is talking about, the violence he faced from the courts, so my whole research was on this issue of violence against women and how the law, myths and misogyny work to really, to operate against the whole feminist ideology. So when we talk about one case of men, but I also see, all these clippings somewhere in the corner about, how women bodies are being chopped, how they are being burnt alive, so all these cases are going on, but there is no voice regarding that. But that one video created a lot of noises and a lot of, men's movement has, is becoming aggressive, that all the laws should be diluted and all. So today, we will look into all these aspects. So also when this is the cartoon which I really found yesterday, and it talks about, how the men's right activists are, working against, not for the cause of women, but they are against women. So they are not raising voices when men die, custodial deaths, when the men are facing custodial torture, or there is a misuse of other kind of laws such as sedition law or UAP or any other such laws. There is no such noises which is being created, just because the women, when women, the case is between men and women. So misogyny is something which is being defined in the Blackpill Dictionary as cultural attitude of hatred for females simply because they are female, and it is a central part of sexist prejudice and ideology, which is a basis for oppression of females. So basically, we hear a lot of jokes and pornography and all kind of violence, which is against the bodies of women. So we have to understand misogyny in that concept. So when we talk about domestic violence, what we see domestic violence is it's also known as intimate partner violence. It is also known as wife beating, cross bedroom terrorism, or patriarchal terrorism. So it's based on three key elements: violence, domesticity, and structural inequalities. And it is because of, within a domestic space, we have to look at the space as well as the relationship between the abused and the abuser and the victim. So, and how the structural inequalities work between abuser and the victim, the paradigm of power and control, and obviously the fact that violence is continuous. So domestic abuse is rooted in patriarchal traditions where abusers feel that it is necessary to control women. We have already discussed that this earlier, that India is recording a very high cases of violence against women. And if we talk about in terms of rape, India records an average of one rape which take place every 6 minutes. That means approximately 100 rapes a day. And if we talk about other kind of crimes, such as cruelty and kidnapping and abduction of women. And we can go on and on. And if we see even the Dowry Prohibition Act, they have number of cases are increasing over the years. Now, how the cases of dowry deaths are being reported. We have seen how the case of violence against men is being, so aggressively being promoted. But 6,000 women die because of dowry death. These are the cases registered in year 2022 as per the National Crime Record Bureau data. And but how it's basically 6450, and the news clipping says more than 6,000 dowry deaths case registered. So the casual way of reporting the violence against women is also normalizing and legitimizing violence. Again, if we see the data, according to WHO, in 2013, there is a report which came out which says that 1 in every 3 women it's being beaten, coerced to sex, or abused in some way or the other during her lifetime. So if you also see the data by National Family Health Survey, it says that only 2% of women who experience violence, they seek the help of police. So this suggests underreporting of the cases of violence against women. The arrest rate in the case of Section 498A, which we will discuss, Section 498 is basically about cruelty against married women, within their matrimonial home. So even if you see the arrest rate, that is only 6%, and which is very less if you compare to the arrest rate in the case of the crimes such as rash driving, theft, riots, or other cases. The conviction rate again is very low for the cases on violence against women generally. And if you talk about domestic violence cases, that is cruelty against married women, those are still very less conviction rate, because many of the cases are being settled or compounded by the courts. Even if you see the medical legal studies, because during my study, I look at, the studies which are being done by the doctors, when the when the women who died because of dowry, they do the post-mortem on those bodies, and then they did the study, and those studies, they reported that when dowry expectations were not met, the young brides in the joint or extended families were murdered, frequently by burning. Many were doused with kerosene and set alight. And in majority of cases, 70 to 80% of body surface, face injury or being burnt. Most women died immediately or within 24 hours due to hypovolemic shock. Murders occurred within initial years of marriage, and most women sustained burns in marital home. Offenders include husband and his family members. Now, agency of these members is depicted through, the way they incite violence to actual participation in committing the crimes. In many cases, investigation is not being done properly, and often the body is being disposed without informing the police or the relative of the woman. So The impact, as we all know, that it endangers the life of women and children. It undermines physical health. It affects, in terms of morbidity, depression, psychological ailment. It also results in various other forms of diseases, and it leads to lack of self-esteem, and also affect a woman's ability to pursue her job or career. So it also, sometimes the women are being isolated, so they're not being even allowed to, communicate with their friends, their relatives, or even their parents. So their, entire capacity of a woman as a survivor to contribute to the society is being hindered because of violence. If we talk about legal reforms, we have to go back to 1980s, where because of stove deaths, many women were dying. So women's organization, they highlighted this fact that these kind of deaths were not accident but murders due to dowry abuse. There was a case of 21-year-old Shashi Bala in March 1979, where she died. She was killed, and she was burned alive while she was pregnant. Another case of Kanchan Chopra, stenographer in Delhi, was burned by her husband, and she was, forced to swallow the acid. So police registered this case as a suicide. On 17 May 1979, Tarvinder Kaur, a 24-year-old bride from Model Town, Delhi, she was burned alive, but her death was just registered as suicide. So there are many cases where women have been burned alive, but the cases are being registered as suicide, and these kind of callousness and corruption on the part of police, it created outrage and resulted in demonstrations. So we have legal provisions which have been, included after a hard struggle, continuous struggle, and we have this section 498A, which was introduced in 1983, and it recognized cruelty against married women by her husband and in-laws as a crime, and the punishment which a person can get is up to 3 years or fine. Section 304B was added, and this relate to dowry deaths. And since these laws have flaws, because women once file a case, they've been thrown out of their home. So the women's movement demanded the laws, and in 2005 we have Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act, and this law introduced civil remedies. So a woman can obtain protection orders, maintenance orders, compensation orders, custody of the children, and so on. So, this is again because of activism by the women's movement that we have got these provisions. But what happened is that it is not, that women wake up one day and say, okay, today I will file a case. Women often endured violence for a number of years before approaching to the police or to the courts, or even telling their own family members. So filing a complaint is not an impulsive decision. And often we have experienced that if women are they are going to the police stations, the cases are not being registered immediately. The courts, the police, at every level, that there is a there are a lot of obstructions and hindrances. So but the court doesn't take the trauma of women into account. So sometimes women, they generally don't file a complaint. It may take years thinking that should I leave this relationship? So where will I go? Because generally the parents, they refuse to help women or take back women because of stigma associated with it. So basically, many of the women, they have this problem. That where should I go even if I leave this man, if this man is abusive? So the legal avenue is the last resort when all other options are being exhausted. So women may go to the local panchayat, local temple, local religious body, local local any other organizations which are there before coming to the courts. So what is happening within the court or the police station is that first of all, they will send you to the crime against women cells. So even it is not easy, for a woman, and in the crime against women cells, what is happening is that basically the counseling is being done mandatorily. So mandatory counseling means that women is being forced to arrive at samjhauta or compromise. Now, basically, this counseling is not about emotional healing or psychological recovery of the victim. This is basically a pressurizing technique where women is being forced to say that, you go back because what will happen to your kids, or what will happen to your family honor, or, all these kind of things are being used to pressurize women to go back to the violent home without any guarantee of safety. So or if the woman remains adamant that I will not go back, then she is being told to settle the case. So, and once a woman file a case, in case she says that, okay, I'll not settle, but I will continue the case in the court. So when she files a case, now the other party, they file a lot of counter applications such as restriction of conjugal rights or application for divorce, for visitation, for custody, or sometimes parents-in-law, they file the lawsuit for eviction of this woman in case she chooses to exercise her right to residence provided under Domestic Violence Act. And if she still persists, the matter continues in the court for years, and the court construe her as a gold digger, liar, family breaker, and so on. So complainants are not seen as survivors who have faced oppression. The system legitimizes the patriarchal norms, and women face a lot of backlash. She is being dispossessed, shattered, and re-victimized by the system because violence is treated as a social crime. So even the Supreme Court in several cases, now they treat the violence against women cases more as matrimonial disputes or ego tussles between the party. That the abusers, they are not being held accountable for their violent actions. And in many of the cases, the courts have just made a sweeping statement that these Section 498A of the dowry law is being misused and abused by the disgruntled woman. So, and in one of the case, the court went up to the extent saying that the family welfare committees should be formulated, and a lot of resistance came from women's movement that how can the court say that without knowing the fact that we already have crime against women cells where women are being forced to compromise these cases. So these kind of the entire history is there. And what happened in the courts when they give judgments, what is happening is that the stereotype of or the binary of good woman versus bad woman is being utilized. A good woman is a kind of a perfect and dutiful wife, and obviously bad wives are denied justice. So there are cases where if a woman has refused to wear Mangal Sutra, or or she has refused to apply sindoor, the court says that it amounts to mental cruelty against the husband. So battered bodies and shattered minds of women are neglected, while the issue of wearing Mangal Sutra or sindoor are prioritized. In one of the case, the court says that because she refused to cook food and serve meals to the husband or any other member of his family, and she used to move out of the home without permission, so therefore that is construed as a bad wife. In another case, in the Allahabad High Court, it says that when a wife refused to prepare tea for the friends of the husband, she not only hurt his ego but caused him humiliation. So these are the kind of the subjectivities which prevail in the courtrooms. And one of the very frequent argument which is being made is that the jails are full of sas and nanand, and so these kind of news are being made as to to create sensation around these cases. But I went and checked the website of the Tihar jail, that is Tihar jail number 6, which constitute the women's jail. So I check all this data that what is happening, and what I found is that of course that the courts are overcrowded, as we all know. But if we see the data, under trials are lodged for committing murders, they are lodged for committing theft, for committing rape, and only 1.81% cases were reported for dowry death and 0.22% for offenses under Section 498A. In terms of convicts, if we say, majority are there for murders, for rape, for thefts, for criminal breach of trust, and only 1.84% for dowry death and 0.16% for Dowry Prohibition Act, and only 0.03% for offenses under 498A. So this data disapproved the assumption that 498A is misused or that the hard jail is not filled with Sas or Nanad or other relatives of the husband. This is the data of 2022, because the day before yesterday, I just visited this website of the hard jail, and this is the data. So again, this is confirming the same kind of, the crimes for which under trials and convicts are there inside the jail. Again, for murders, there are more number of, the percentage is high. And if you see the last, column, that is about cruelty by husband and relatives, only 0.08%. So this is the kind of way the media create sensation around the issues of domestic violence and dowry death. So these in my study, I have tried to raise all these questions that why wife beating is considered as a lesser crime by the state and the society. The abusers of the crime are not held accountable for the unlawful actions. The different parameters of justice are being utilized when a woman is abused within private spaces. Because when we talk about rape, we have laws, we have a lot of research, but again, for domestic violence, again, it comes lower in the hierarchy. So the legal system has failed to deliver justice to the battered women. In terms of, the state has failed to see women complainants as autonomous citizens, and they construe the entire, the legal case within the domain of family or kinship. So there are people who are advocating for dilution of the law, but they are not raising the issue relating to provision of shelter homes or material and economic support to women. So the law, the domestic violence law talks about having shelter homes, medical facilities, and legal aid, but of course they are less in numbers. But nobody is raising these kind of concerns when they talk about dilution of law. So even the courts, the Supreme Court, they have given a lot of judgments that the law should be diluted. So, but they're not talking about all these, why the Domestic Violence Act is not fully being implemented. So when we talk about domestic violence, here we are talking about the home, which should be providing comfort and safety and all those kind of facilities, and by the so-called protectors. But here what is happening is the protectors are violating the rights of women, and the state is favoring the abusers. Also, domestic violence law is seen basically as a man versus a woman issue, whereas the women's movement has been saying for long that it is more about patriarchal oppression and more about how patriarchy operates and power dynamics within the family. So the victims are being blamed and victimized by the legal system. So why this is happening? So you can read my book, so it's there on the internet, but I'll just end here that with this quote by Gloria Steinem, that patriarchy requires the threat of violence in order to maintain itself. The most dangerous situation for a woman is not an unknown man in the street or even an enemy in the wartime, but a husband or a lover in the isolation of their own home. So I'll just end here with this quote, and we can have further discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this engaging session. I would now like to invite our chair to share her remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Your presentation on legal hands-on, very useful, and the case studies you gave, they are also very illuminating. I just want to know that currently, after the death of Bangalore techie, all men, retired bureaucrats and retired judges and lawyers and young professionals and all of them are just talking about this case, and they said that the laws are biased in favor of women, and that is why this tragedy took place. Even if you give arguments, you give data, all these things, they are just not there. As if you are just talking, it is a dialogue of the deaf, no? That kind of thing. They are just not ready to, this one particular incident they take, and after that, they come up with such a regressive statement that whatever we have done in last 40 years in the women's movement, all that, those experiences are wiped out. Very aggressive. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. This is and this is what I think we should have to educate, basically starting from the state machinery itself. Even the judges, the lawyers, the police, all they are having that same kind of thing. And it's not just this one case. Even before also, I've been seeing that how the Supreme Court judges have been, or even the High Court judges have been giving the kind of judgments which we really feel that these are anti-women kind of judgments. So
And now the new movement has started, no? Gender neutral laws. Everywhere they want gender neutral laws. So they will not think like take into consideration dowry and the power relation between grooms and brides, and so many data of NFHS on domestic violence, no? And even the opinion poll, under 8 circumstances, Indian youth feel that husband is justified to beat his wife, or the in a matrimonial home, if she is violated, if she doesn't good, as you give the examples of so many judgments, no? So none of this, but this one man who had to commit suicide, any tragedy, we are in solidarity with the person, and it happened in a very tragic way. That is under, but based on this, they want to remove all the progressive laws which are protective and which provide support to women's survivor of violence.
the misogyny, I think that a lot of misogyny I'm seeing, like that the photograph of women is being circulated, and they are saying all kind of negative comments about that women. So that seems it's really our entire struggles of so many years is just
Yeah, and now the information technology has made the prestigious educational institutions, even the international schools and all, everywhere girls are this. What happened in South Korea has started happening in our this thing, and so many of them, they go into trauma, they change the school. Punishment is only for girls and women, because they would change their line also. If you are in IIT doing engineering, you would start doing BA economics, no, those kinds. So price is paid only by women and girls because of this. The patriarchal unity, or the unity of man, no, through WhatsApp group and information technology machinery, is so horrifying and so hounding that women feel completely disarmed. No?
Yes, ma'am. So we have to really now find ways to counter, how to really counter this kind of propaganda which is being, propagated by all the men's movement. Now, again, the men's movement, I'm coming again and again, because men's movement, they are not doing anything for the men, but it's just an anti-women kind of propaganda.
Nothing constructive. Pati Bachao Manch and all, they don't provide any kind of a support to the dispute issues, no, like hand holding and all. The way women's groups are doing hand holding, they don't do that. But it's a propaganda, and using the social media for this kind of outrage, misogynist outrage.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to open the floor for question and answer session. Participants can either raise their hand or type their questions in the Q&A box.
Yeah, shab number 2.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Ma'am, so when we look at our country, I mean, we had cases like triple talaq abolished in 2019, which was very beneficial for all the women, especially the Muslim women. But we still see that a lot of, because I'm a Muslim myself, so I see this problem on a very personal level, that even after abolishing triple talaq, I still see that a lot of people are still going through it, doing it. They do not care about the constitutional I mean, they don't care whether it's abolished or not. They're still doing it because, and there are women who are educated women who do not consider that it has been abolished by law, because they feel like if it's in the religion, they can't oppose it. And similarly, there are a lot of educated women. For example, I oppose it totally, but then there are still laws for in Muslim personal vote, like child marriages and then polygamy. I mean, Delhi High Court and Haryana High Court allowing child marriages taking place. It's very regressive, I feel. And then we have polygamy. So how do we deal with that? And I don't see a lot of people advocating for Muslim women rights as such, because it's again patriarchal and very misogynist, I think. And I don't see a lot of people advocating for Muslim women's rights as such, because they feel that it's not their jurisdiction to talk on Islam or Islamic laws and regulations. While Hindus have been, we had problems in ancient days, like child marriages taking place in Hindu society as well. But then Hindus have been very open-minded, and they very easily changed and reformed these things. Today, child marriage in Hindu society is criminal, and we see it very rarely happening in some villages and rural areas, and it's criminal, it's punishable. But for Muslims, it takes a lot to punish a Muslim in our country. So how do we deal with that, and how do we start advocating for Muslim women? I mean, polygamy is a nuisance more than triple talaq. Polygamy at the first place should have been abolished. So eventually, triple talaq would have been abolished automatically. So how do you look at it, and how do we advocate for it? Because for a Muslim woman, for a girl like me, I cannot even say it in publicly or cannot write for it publicly, because if I write about it, there are blasphemical laws for which I'm punishable, and it does not care about whether you are in a democratic state or not. Today, if I'm speaking out loud, or if I have a free speech, it's because Indian values and Indic values and Indian constitution has allowed me to. But there are misogynist people in our country as well, who do care about the Islamic code of law. They will go after me, saying that it's apostasy, it's blasphemy, and you should be punished. So how do we deal with that, ma'am?
Yeah, if I have to see, I have to see the entire history, because how even the constitution is being made and how it is being applicable. Because we have seen a lot of cases about, not only among Hindus or even among Muslims, these kind of things are there. Child marriage is still prevalent, and after COVID, it has increased in numbers, even even among Hindus. And we have seen a lot of cases of honor killing, and a lot of other kind of violence is taking a lot of different kind of shapes. And uh, our laws are not sufficient enough, or the laws are not keeping pace with the way the violence is being expanding, and it is being getting a virulent form. So whether you talk about, and especially if you see the Muslim the entire this thing about the way the maintenance case was taken up earlier, and how the entire politics which really went behind. So basically, it is being, the issues are being polarized, they are being polarized, they are being weaponized by the political, parties, and, how the political parties are talking about, to create more polarization, to maintain their power. They are creating a lot of polarization. And because of that, many people are not even talking about domestic violence cases, the dowry violence. I was about to publish my book on dowry violence, and I could see that no publisher was ready to publish it, because they say it's an old issue. Like, they just don't want to take up these kind of issues. Just really wondering, why these kind of issues are not. And this is something which has happened in past few years, which has happened more. So this is, these are the considerations. We have to look into the entire history of how the patriarchy and the power and the polarization, the communalization which is taking place, and how we have to deal with it. So basically, as ma'am has earlier said in her lecture, yeah, so we have to have more platform, more discussions about all these issues against patriarchy, against against this communal polarization, against how the men are in the power, are using this patriarchy and communalization as weapons to really enforce their whatever their misogynist norms or whatever you said. But these are the kind of things which are happening, and we have to really counter that by creating more spaces for women to talk about their issues, their concerns. So even in the courts, again, now they say that okay, maintenance law is same for Hindu, Muslim, or Christian, or women from for any religion, or even the Domestic Violence Act is same for all women. But in the courts, we see that different kind of power dynamics are working, where the judges they're refusing to take up, they're refusing to give a positive judgment. So every time, for every small thing, I have to go to High Court or to the Supreme Court to get a positive order. Then only, even in cases of bail, as we have been seeing that we have to go to the High Court or to the Supreme Court to even get a simple bail. So similarly, in the cases of women, these kind of things are happening.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am can really add, ma'am. Professor Patel,
Yeah, I think that we in Bombay we have 5 organizations of Muslim women, Parcham and Savitri Fatima Sheikh Association, then Bamma Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, Awaz-e-Niswa, and Bebak Collective. So I think when you are working on a day-to-day basis in the community, you get to know sympathetic man. Like in Bamma would always involve the Mauli Sahab, who would see on a humanitarian ground, who would intervene and see to it that she gets maintenance. Plus, we have a protection of women from domestic violence act. In fact, Majlis has been always using that act to get the maintenance. Because it's the way law is defined, no, economic violence is also included. So they would get maintenance via this. And there are many such cases in session courts, high courts, where women are using different routes. They would not get it under the 125, section 125, but they would get it under this. Other things are out of court settlement. That if a man gives talaq to his first wife and she has children, then you would discuss with the employer or the trade union. So these are the ways, like in Bombay, we did that. Like we talked to the employer, and they said that look, this lady, where will she go? She has 3 children, college-going children. Their education will stop, and husband is with a young woman, and he was politically also connected. But still, we said that we could convince the husband and wife to have an agreement in collaboration with the employer and the trade union leaders that she should be given. There are 2 checks should be made of his salary. One should be given to his wife to look after herself and her 3 children, because she was in her early 50s, no, and this. So when you don't have a legal protection, the things become difficult. But the community level work, if you go case by case and do the hand-holding, then you find the local solutions. So localization of law or localization of the practice to provide support structures to women survivors, that is possible.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring and engaging talk with us. It's always a pleasure learning from you, and we look forward to having you at our future IMPRI events as well. I now request the chair for closing remarks.
Yeah. So I think we had a two very interesting this thing which complemented the previous sessions, and some of the missing elements were discussed here. And the first one is about the geopolitical context of South Asia, where the complexity of addressing women and peace and security issues where there are multiple marginalities and the intersectionalities of social layers, where you have various linguistics groups and ethnic groups and religious groups, and even in the context of neoliberal economic policies, which are increasing chasm between different communities, cultural nationalism, identity politics. They are not allowing the working class to come together. So it is in this context when there is a ideology of jingoism, lot of insecurity among the people, and also because of the the neoliberal policy generated unemployment and whole informalization of the workforce, women suffer the most. And that's why I think it is very important to for self-mobilization of women. And as Professor Chenoy told us, that we need to continuously deconstruct the way gender relations are reshaping in the current context. So negotiation of contradictory and complicit patriarchies of state, community, and family, I think that becomes very important. And here comes the contribution of Professor Dr. Shalu Nigam, who spoke on the domestic violence side, that how the political also impacts personal. In fact, the study by women's organizations of Gujarat Riots 2002, which showed that the men who were so aggressive and violent towards women from minority communities, who raped them or brutalized them, they were equally violent in the domestic arena. So if you see the NFHS data of that time, like 45% women in Gujarat had already experienced domestic violence, and still there are no new structures like the way we have one-stop crisis center in Maharashtra or 6 states of India we have. So it is not an egalitarian or principle of citizenship. They are only within the framework of protect women. They are not addressing man not to be violent, but still it is there. In Gujarat, it was not even there. So where do these women go when they are violated? So I think there is the violence in the personal domain, domestic arena, and the violence in the society or violence in the public domain. They are two sides of the same coin. And I think that's what has emerged from today's presentations by both the experts, Professor Anuradha Chenoy and Dr. Shalu Nigam. And I thank both of them for showing this complex realities in such a lucid manner. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Should we now proceed with the formal vote of thanks?
Yes.
As we come to the end of day 7 of LPPYF, Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, Cohort 4.0, Winter 2024. Theme: Inclusivity in Peace and Conflict Resolution, Rethinking Policy, Advocacy and Implementation, an online national winter school program, a 3-month immersive online law and public policy awareness certificate training course and internship program. I, Avi Sharma, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI New Delhi. We are grateful to our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, and the experts for the day 7 session, Professor Anuradha M. Chenoy ji and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, for taking out their valuable time and for their thought-provoking insights on the topics. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you all on day 8 of the certification course on December 24, 2024, Tuesday, featuring distinguished experts Professor Asha Hansji, fellows, creative project presentations, and discussion on feedback session. We would be grateful if you watch us later on YouTube, listen to us on various podcasts, and read our publications. We hope you continue to join us in the future too of our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you all a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Avi, for
Thank you, ma'am.
moderating this session. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you, Anuradha.